When are we going to get serious about this and stop making it a political discussion and make it more about a life discussion?
Comments from obviously a very frustrated and pained Chief James White. Let's use that as our jumping off point now as we start our conversations with the Republican candidates for governor. Very happy to have with me today Tudor Dixon. Tudor, thanks very much for coming. After a really tough week, I pointed out earlier, just about the time you all were talking about gun policy and gun violence in your debate, this was what was happening in Detroit. You all have similar policies when it comes to guns, but after we see what happened on a night like Thursday night or Wednesday night in Detroit, what do we do about it?
I think it's important to think about what the chief is saying, and that is keep these people in jail. If they have committed a crime, he doesn't want to see them back out on the streets. And these police officers way too often are getting ambushed, no matter where I am in the state. That's what I'm hearing. Our police officers are in danger because the prosecutors in some cities and some counties are letting them out. Now, not all, but that is a problem, and that's something we need to look at.
The comment that you've had about gun control is that gun control to you means two hands on the gun. It seems a little cold after something like this. I mean, is there nothing we can do about trying to stem the gun violence that is not just wrecking Detroit this week, but we're watching it all over the country right now?
Yeah, but let's take a look at what happened last week when you look back at the 4th of July celebration in Illinois, where you see gun control. And that's a situation where they have red flag laws. That didn't work. So why present a fake solution, something that's not actually going to solve the problem? Because here's a situation where you have a man who already had weapons confiscated from his home. The police were there, and yet his father, he vouches for him, and he essentially allows him to buy these weapons. So at what point are we going to start holding these people accountable that see that this person should not have a weapon, and yet they're vouching for them? Should the parents be held accountable? I mean, we're seeing that in Oxford. When are we going to say, when you see a mental health problem, you need to step up and take responsibility?
I take it you agree with the charging of the parents then in Oxford. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the broader issues that will boil down to you, and if you become the nominee, you and Governor Whitmer. I think our time is better served helping Republicans understand why you're the best choice among the other Republicans. You all have many, many things in common. You all feel the same way about the last election. You all feel the same way about Donald Trump. You're all seeking his support. You all want to lower taxes in Michigan. So why don't you tell me, where's the separator of Tudor Dixon from the Republican field?
I think if you just look at what we've all done while we've been campaigning, I've reached out to people, whether it's the grassroots or the business community, and I've sat down and I've talked to these folks and really learned what they need, whether they are Republicans or independents. You know, this state is not necessarily red or blue, right? We have to talk to everybody, and we have to be able to talk to people across the aisle. And we've been able to win the support of the Police Officers Association and the business community as well. And I think that's really the differentiating factor. But the reason I've been able to do that is that I come from a business background and a communications background. So I understand what our businesses are dealing with. And so many of our businesses say, we're really being crushed by what's happening in government in Michigan. And I've been able to understand that and say we can make changes there, but also we need to support safe communities and talk to parents in a different way about education, being a mom of 4.
None of you have any legislative experience. Isn't that a gap in all of your resumes?
I think that's why it's so important to get behind the person who is willing to make the relationships. We've heard from the other candidates that they don't want to work with the people who are elected, and yet I've been endorsed by 20 legislators. I've sat down with them. We've worked together. You saw me on the Capitol steps last week. I understand what I need to do to make sure I have the right people on my team.
One of the other things that you all agree on is you're all against abortions. We saw this past week that over 800,000, it looks like, signatures are going to be delivered on creating a constitutional amendment in the state. And it raises a pretty good question as as to whether you believe as governor you should be leading what you believe in your own personal beliefs, or whether you should be representing the beliefs of Michiganders, because polls show us that almost 3/4 of Michiganders are in favor of the protections of abortion rights under Roe versus Wade.
If that does get on the ballot, then we'll see. But I think that we need to be aware of what exactly is going on the ballot, because that takes all protections off the books. So you no longer have parental consent. There's no education ahead of time. In fact, it changes the language so that a healthcare professional can be anybody. It could be a school nurse that would be giving somebody an abortion without a parent's consent. So I think we have to be really aware of the no limits that we're looking at. The situation that we're looking at would be dismemberment abortion in this state. So I think there needs to be education on exactly what we are looking at if that were to pass.
Speak to my broader point, though, about whether you believe that as governor we should be deferring to your judgment. Are we electing your judgment, or are we electing your representation of the beliefs of Michiganders?
I would follow the law. So the law on the books right now is that we have an abortion, no abortion, with the exception of life of the mother. Obviously, if suddenly this were on the ballot and the people of Michigan vote this in, then that's beyond the governor's control. You know my position on abortion. I've been very clear. I agree with the 1931 law. If the people of Michigan were to vote something else in, that's, like you said, in the Constitution, but that's not what I'm hearing.
Another thing that is something that you all have in common, you all want to lower taxes on Michiganders, but there's very little specificity. It's one thing to lower taxes at the federal level and not worry about what it does to our debt. We can't do that in the state. So where does what is specifically, where do you think that we are spending on things that need to be cut for us to allow tax cuts?
I've come out and I've said that I've already agreed with what the legislature has done. They've found a way to twice now come to the governor and lower the income tax. Two different options for lowering the income tax. Let's do that right away, because that's already been figured out. It's not a matter of where would we cut. They've already done this. This is just a matter of passing it now, and the governor has vetoed that every time. Why is she so opposed to tax relief? It's never come through. Even during the pandemic, when she could have offered tax relief to small businesses, she vetoed that as well. We're looking for what we can do. It's already been figured out.
When it comes to courting business, we've watched some big projects be announced to stay in Michigan or come to Michigan. We've also watched some leave. There's a very fine line between creating the incentives that businesses want to see and creating giveaways and being completely beholden to companies and kind of letting them create extremely long-term agreements that some people fear don't keep the long-term good of Michiganders in mind. Where's this fine line between attracting business and yet keeping responsible expectations on the companies that do business in Michigan?
Well, we've been very clear that we want to look at all corporate welfare and exactly what we're giving away. But right now, the issue that I'm hearing from corporations across the state and outside of the state is if we come to Michigan, there's no workforce. So that's really the focus that we have to have right now. How do we bring people, how do we incentivize people to come to the state? What can we do to get families to the state? What can we do to have our graduates stay in Michigan? And that's a real strong focus for our campaign right now, to make sure that we can bring people back, because you just saw the news. We're losing people. We've been stagnant since the early 2000s. And now we're seeing that people are actually leaving the state. We're losing population. That's the worst possible scenario for bringing business here. If you don't have workers, you can't have business here. So we absolutely have to have that fundamental requirement in place. And that means we have to start thinking about, do we incentivize people to come to the state, and what does that look like?
Well, it's interesting because we have seen some people that are known as climigrants now. We have people who are this climigration that people are referring to, where other people are being chased out of other parts of the country, and Michigan and the Midwest just happens to be pretty well positioned. What are your thoughts, though, about what the state has to do to worry about climate change and create a future that is attractive to other people to come into?
Well, I think, I was talking to someone about this earlier today, and they said, honestly, we're one of the states that doesn't have natural disasters. We don't have a lot of these negatives that you're seeing in some of these other states. Why can't we kind of advertise our progress in that case. You know, here's a state where we have so much beauty. I mean, my girls and I were at the beach over the weekend, and I think that people just don't even know how beautiful the state of Michigan is. So those issues, I think we have energy companies that are working very hard to combat those issues nationwide, and they're in the state of Michigan. But when it comes to an environment to live in, this is the most beautiful place in the country.
We agree on that. Tudor Dixon, thanks very much for the time. I know we'll talk to you further as we head toward the campaign, toward Election Day, which is getting very close.
Very
now in the
close,
primary.
yes.
You bet. Thanks so much.